Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, we're really glad you're with us on this Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, the President's Day edition. We've got good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives, and we're sponsored by Theragun, so all of that is good. First of all, Jim, happy President's Day to you, or as I prefer to call it, Washington's birthday, which I believe is the official federal holiday, or at least it used to be. And for those of you wishing to extol the virtues of Millard Fillmore and Rutherford B. Hayes and Benjamin Harrison, anybody except Woodrow Wilson, you're probably going to be okay today. But, the February presidents, Washington, Lincoln, Reagan, William Henry Harrison, it's really where it's at. So I'm sure you're celebrating in your own special way today, right, Jim?
You know what I call today, Greg? Monday.
Yeah, Monday, yes. All right, let's talk about our good martini today, and it's a follow-up to one of our, it's good news that the bad news is coming out martinis from Friday, and this is related to Governor Andrew Cuomo and the revelation, to virtually no one's surprise, that they undercounted and even delayed reporting at all the number of nursing home-related COVID deaths. This is the Free Beacon. A bipartisan group of New York lawmakers is calling for Governor Andrew Cuomo to be stripped of his emergency powers as fallout from his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The call comes less than a day after the New York Post reported that a Cuomo aide admitted the administration suppressed information about nursing home deaths in the state. The aide said the administration froze out of fear that federal prosecutors would use the information in an investigation into Cuomo's handling of the pandemic. 14 Democratic state senators joined Republicans in calling for Cuomo's emergency powers, which the state legislature granted to him last March, to be rescinded. The split in the state Senate in New York is 43 Democrats, 20 Republicans. So if you flip 14, that makes it 34 in favor of taking away his emergency powers and just 29 in favor of keeping them. I don't know what the story is in the state House. Very quickly, here's the statement issued by the 14 state Senate Democrats. Without exception, the New York State Constitution calls for the legislature to govern as a co-equal branch of government. While COVID-19 has tested the limits of our people and state, and early during the pandemic required the government to restructure decision-making to render rapid, necessary public health judgments, it is clear that the expanded emergency powers granted to the governor are no longer appropriate. While the executive's authority to issue directives is due to expire on April 30th, we urge the Senate to advance and adopt a repeal as expeditiously as possible. So, Jim, it's not often you get a lot of people from the same party going after the executive, but I think the facts here are extraordinarily damning and good on these Democrats to put even more pressure on Cuomo, at least to this level. I know a lot of people want anything up to impeachment, censure, whatever, so they would probably see this as a slap on the wrist, but at least they're moving in the right direction here.
Yeah, it's a much needed step. Now, I feel the obligation to disclose to our listeners that when Greg suggested this story, I looked at the figures for how many people are in the New York State Senate instead. But Greg, that's not a majority. And Greg corrected me to point out that yes, that would be a majority in the Senate, and that would be enough to pass this. So one, good for you, Greg. Two, now the question is, what's wrong with those other state senators? Why do they look at this and not only not see a reason to impeach or any formal censure or anything like that? They don't even think this is a reason to take back the governor's emergency powers. And what have we learned from the history of democracy going back? We saw this, not just going back or last century. You can even look in a galaxy far, far away about what happens when you give one leader emergency powers. They tend to not give it back. The emergencies should be emergencies. They should not be the sort of things that go on forever. And this is, almost every dictatorship and military coup and every other authoritarian regime claims these emergency powers because of some sort of terrible crisis, sometimes genuine, sometimes contrived. And then they say, we'll give them back later, we promise. And then they never quite get around to doing it. Now, we don't necessarily have that particular situation. But the idea that New York State is still in a emergency situation that requires these far-reaching powers of the governor is ridiculous. I have pointed out how New York State has done among the worst. You can argue New Jersey is a little bit worse in one or two categories, but on a per capita basis, per million residents basis, number of cases, number of deaths, New York is if not the very worst, then right near the top. And what New York is seeing is the same thing we're seeing all across the country. Cases are down 40% over the last 2 weeks. That's really good news. So a little bit of that's probably the vaccination, but we're not that far into that process. I think it's more that we're leaving winter. I think it's more than you had the Thanksgiving get-togethers, you had the Christmas get-togethers. People were more likely to start interacting with each other. You know, as you get into winter, people have fewer times where they're in the same house. They're in in indoor settings. The air is circulated, and they end up spreading it more. Well, for a good chunk of December, New York was in the heading up to the 13,000 new cases a day, 14,000 new cases a day, even up to 20,000 cases back on January 15th. But it's been declining pretty steadily there ever since then. We're now in the 8,000 and 9,000 cases a day. What do you need to see to say, hey, the governor doesn't need these emergency powers anymore? Because it's not saying all these things that are being done you can't keep those policies in place. It simply means the governor does not get to do all these things by himself. He has to start consulting with the state legislature again. And now that somebody on the governor's staff has come out and said, we deliberately withheld public health data from you because we thought if we did, the U.S. Department of Justice would investigate us. What more do you need to hear, Democratic state legislators? What are you waiting for to say, no, that's it. You don't get these privileges anymore. This was only for a special case of emergency. You don't get to keep them anymore. It's back to us because we can't trust you to handle these powers responsibly. What do you need to see, New York State Democratic legislators?
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a majority in the state Senate headed in that direction. We'll see if the House agrees at some point, hopefully soon. But yeah, I mean, it's a double whammy, like you just said. They aren't needed anymore, and you can't trust Andrew Cuomo to continue with them. And so good on those New York Democrats, at least 14 of them, for admitting that up front. But we'll see if that's the extent of the consequences for Governor Cuomo's action. Well, if you're tense about your governor lying about the number of people killed by a stupid nursing home policy, or you're going to be tense because of the next two martinis that we're going to be talking about here, Theragun is definitely the way to go. Don't let the stress of daily life weigh on your body. Whether you're an elite athlete or someone like us, just trying to make it through the day tension-free, Theragun can definitely help.
Greg, how many podcasts will give you reasons to feel tense and then give you a way to not feel so tense afterwards? Theragun is the handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combo of depth, speed, and power, and it is as quiet as an electric toothbrush. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension, using Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone. Whether you want to treat your muscle tension from working out, or because of an injury, or just the stress of everyday life, there is no substitute for the Theragun Gen 4.
The OLED screen and design make you feel like you're holding something from the future. Just go to their site and check it out, and the Theragun app learns from your behaviors and actually suggests guided routines. I joked about the future. That's pretty cool when the Theragun can actually calculate based on where you've used it on what muscle groups and then create a therapy routine just for you. My wife and I love the Theragun. We use it on the feet, quads, back, definitely. Even on the neck. You got to be a little careful on the neck, but definitely there as well. Theragun is trusted by 250 professional sports teams like Real Madrid and elite athletes like Paul George, DeAndre Hopkins, Maria Sharapova, hundreds of thousands of customers, and yes, me. So try Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. Go to Theragun.com/martini right now and get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's Theragun.com/martini. Again, Theragun.com/martini. All right, Jim, let's talk about another COVID-related issue. A lot of discussion about this issue today, but this one could be in the crazy. It's just mind-boggling. AP, the Biden administration's plan to open 100 vaccination sites by the end of the month was initially embraced by governors and health officials who considered it a much-needed lifeline to get more Americans inoculated against the coronavirus. But reality has quickly set in. Some are hesitating to take the offer, at least for now, saying they don't need more places to administer doses, they just need more doses. Eager to protect more people against the coronavirus, health officials in Oklahoma, for example, jumped at the chance to add large, federally supported vaccination sites. They wanted them in Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and a third mid-sized city, Lawton, thinking the extra help would allow them to send more doses to smaller communities that had yet to benefit. Those plans are now on hold after the state learned that the sites would not come with additional vaccines. Instead, the doses would have to be pulled from the state's existing allocation, and the 3 sites alone might have used more than half of Oklahoma's vaccine supply. So instead of helping to solve the problem, Jim, it's making the problem worse by divvying it up into even more sites.
Yeah, people have been reading both the Morning Jolt and my corner posts on this, know that this is something I'm borderline obsessed with these days. In part because I feel like what we're being told about how much vaccine is available, like there's a giant gap between how much vaccine we're told has been distributed to the states and how much is ending up in people's arms. It's gotten down, I think, to about, it started out at 20 million. At one point it was up to 21 million. And now I think we're in the neighborhood of, we've used 76% of the available amount that's out there. You're looking at something like, 17, 18 million that's still there. It's been sent out. It's just not being used. It's not getting into people's arms. And so, like maybe a million or two of that can be reporting delays, but a lot of that, and then some of that might be people, the stuff that they're holding for a second dose for people who have already received the first dose. Biden administration and the CDC have said, we don't want you to do that. We want you to keep putting shots in people's arms, but maybe that's it. But that's still a huge amount. And now that Biden, there was this whole lot of hype about this. Slotnick or whatever it was, and all these guys, they're very excited about this. But then all of a sudden you realize we are promising you we're going to build a giant site. We're going to have tents. We're going to have people to put the shots into the arms. The only thing we're not going to give you is the vaccines. Well, it's kind of important for the vaccine process. It's almost this absurd. If you had like giant amounts of supply and not enough people to administer it, then it would make sense. Okay, that's when you would need something like this. But in a whole bunch of states, they're getting the CVS's and the Walgreens. They call the retail pharmacy program on board. Walmart is doing it. If you can do a flu vaccine, chances are you can do this vaccine. I don't imagine it's going to require enormous amounts of retraining of medical personnel. That if you take the needle, you put it in the shot in the arm. Maybe it requires a little bit of proper training and storage and making sure it's kept at a certain temperature or something like that. But by and large, this is not a giant logistical hurdle. No, it seems like the problem is that we just don't have enough vaccine. And the Biden administration said they're addressing this. They said they were going to start giving places a greater assurance about how much was going to be arriving. I still don't understand this stuff because back when Operation Warp Speed was launching, they said every one of these is going to have a GPS in it. It shouldn't be lost. It should not be missing anywhere. It should not be sitting in it. They should be able to account for every single crate of every single dose that they've ever produced here. Pfizer and Moderna know where they got shipped. It gets to the States, and it's like it disappears. All right? It does not make any sense. I'll give you just one example of how just bizarre this is and how the explanations are so vague. San Diego County in California was supposed to, they said there's a delivery of the Moderna vaccines did not arrive in San Diego on Friday as planned. So now they've had to delay a whole bunch. And this is kind of like this kind of a domino effect. Like you're lining up your appointments, with expectations that the doses will be there. If it doesn't arrive on a certain day, then everybody you're expected to do that day has to get pushed back to another day. So it says appointments scheduled for Friday and Saturday will be honored at the site, but may depend on availability. And they had to close the super vaccinations site in downtown San Diego. Has to be closed Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Now, nobody's got any explanation as to why this shipment didn't get there. But it's like, I'm just baffled by this. There's really no good explanation for this. And they had months and months to prepare this. So, dear Biden administration, it's nice to have more people to distribute it. It's nice to have all the tents. But if you don't have more vaccines, nothing's going to happen. So now the question is, where are the vaccines and why are there anywhere from 17 million to 21 million doses that nobody can account for? That's the big problem here. And then, oh, by the way, I'm great. It's, I may have missed this late last week. They announced, we've bought more than 600 million doses. So we can now do 2 doses to everybody, all adults by the end of July. Look, I'm not going to complain about that. All of the things being equal, that's good. But I'm not really sure how much, like if it arrives in May and in June, like, by hopefully by April, you get to the point where everybody who wants it can get it. The real big issue we're trying to think of is like right now we need a lot more vaccine now, right? For the old people, for the immunocompromised people. Like that's the ticking clock. That's the race we're up against. Young, healthy people, 99% chance they're going to be just fine. So what we really need is to get more vaccines out there. We have this warehouse somewhere in East Baltimore where they've got tens of millions of doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the AstraZeneca/Oxford vaccine. Johnson & Johnson vaccine is supposed to approve by the end of the month. I don't know what the CDC is doing until then, or the Food and Drug Administration is doing until then. You'd like to think they're doing this as fast as possible. I've heard from some doctors who say this can be done in 24 to 48 hours. Maybe that's too fast. I don't know. Does it require 3 weeks? Because that's what it's taken right now. And as for AstraZeneca, they haven't even submitted to the FDA yet. So we don't know when it'll take minimum 3 weeks after that application. But we've got the doses there. They're sitting there on the shelf, ready to go. But we can't do that. And rant, Greg.
Well, clearly the answer here is more bureaucracy. So that's what the Biden administration is trying to put in here.
They've done such a terrific job.
Hey guys, it's Mock and Daisy from Chicks on the Right. We're excited to tell you about our podcast, the Mock and Daisy Common Sense Cast.
From discussing topics like cancel culture, what's happening to our new generations, crises in our nation, and even some high-profile interviews, each week we touch on subjects that matter to us and matter to you.
And we're not afraid to tell you how it is. So tune in every week to hear us talk about the things or even just get a good laugh.
To find out more, go to our website, chicksontheright.com, or start listening on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Don't forget to leave a comment, a review, and subscribe.
All right, Jim. Well, I'll let you rest momentarily from your rant because I feel like you've got another one winding up for our crazy martini here. It was less than 2 weeks ago. It was earlier this month in February when the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, essentially said, hey, we got to get the kids back in school. We need to do it so quickly. It doesn't even require that all teachers be vaccinated, even though in many places teachers are being pushed to the front of the line as part of the effort to get everybody back into school. We should have known when Jen Psaki at the White House briefing a day or two later said, you know what, Dr. Walensky, talking for herself. We don't have the guidance yet, so we don't have official administration policy. She doesn't speak for the administration. Well, now Dr. Walensky is out speaking for the administration, and you can tell she's tortured as she's doing so. Both she and Fauci have said that we need to get the kids back in school, and now both of them are towing the administration line, which is essentially bowing and kowtowing to the teachers' unions. A couple of quick clips. First of all, on Walensky. We'll get to Fauci later. But Walensky, and Jim has more on her past on this issue as recently as last summer. But here she is with Jake Tapper on State of the Union, with Tapper asking a pretty basic question and Walensky offering nothing but word salad because she knows that the administration's policy doesn't make any sense.
And there are a lot of people out there watching who think, like, I thought the science said we should open the schools as long as we take those safety steps. We're taking the safety steps, and we're not opening the schools.
Yeah, so there are numerous research studies that have demonstrated that if with universal masking and 6 feet of distancing and de-densification of the classrooms, that it's possible to get schools back safely. With all of that happening, 92% of people in those studies were masked. We have other data that was just published in CDC's MMWR that demonstrate that somewhere around 60% of students are reliably masking. That has to be universal. So we have work to do, especially when the country remains in the red zone of high community transmission. As that transmission comes down, we'll be able to relax some of these measures. But the real point is to make sure that the science is consistent with our guidance, which is consistent to say until we can ensure that we have all those measures happening, that the schools wouldn't be safe.
And here's Tapper's classic response.
I'm just really confused. It seems to me like you're saying the schools are safe to open as long as everybody takes these steps, but not everybody's taking these steps. Therefore, we're not going to open the schools. Do I have that right?
So, Jim, less than 2 weeks ago, she says we can go back. The teachers don't even need to be vaccinated. Now she says that schools that are in red zones because of concerns about community spread can't go back. And as Tapper pointed out, 99% of school kids are in the red zone. So everything has done a complete 180 here from what Walensky said just a couple of weeks ago because the administration doesn't want to defy the teachers union.
Yeah, and Greg, let's observe that all across the country, a whole bunch of private schools open. And I have not seen a post-apocalyptic landscape in which the bodies are carried out every day. You know, the private schools are managing to do this. It's a complete question. Why is it so much harder for the public schools to do this? Now, by the way, for the last year, we've been repeatedly warned over and over again, the worst thing that could happen would be if politicians or political interest groups started interfering and contradicting the assessment of public health experts. That, by the way, is exactly what happened when Jen Psaki said, oh, Walensky at CDC. That's just her speaking in her personal capacity. That's not really, as if Walensky has some personal opinion that's going to be completely different from what the CDC recommendation. No. When you're the CDC director and you're speaking at the White House, that's your official opinion. There is no secret other opinion that's hiding behind the curtain somewhere. But then the second thing was, this is a story that, is just absolutely mind-boggling. One of the things in the recommendation is try to have kids recommend having kids 6 feet apart. Well, for it's getting the number of kids in a classroom, that's tough. For having the kids in a hallway, that's tough. By the way, you probably have noticed in your ordinary life, dear listeners, you go to the supermarket, people don't always stay 6 feet away from you. If you're really unlucky, they'll be wearing 2 masks on their chin and still bump into you. But it's one of those things where inside buildings, somebody's going to come within 6 feet of you, and you just hope that your mask works and their mask works, and you try to minimize that amount of time. But there are some doctors who looked at this and said, actually, the 6 feet number is kind of arbitrary, and that the real, you can keep pretty darn safe according to 3. And I'll give you a good example of a school district that was struggling with this. This is back in July. Newton, Massachusetts, school district was trying to figure out how to reopen the schools, how do you keep a safe distance? And the mayor, a woman named Ruth Ann Fuller, emailed a Harvard professor of medicine and the chief of infectious disease and said, look, we're leaning towards 6 feet of separation in our classrooms rather than the 3 feet that the World Health Organization and other organizations are allowing. What do you think? And the reply from Harvard's chief of infectious disease was pretty clear. Quote, I do think if people are masked, it is quite safe and much more practical to be at 3 feet. I think this is very viable for the middle and high schools and even late grade schools and would improve the feasibility. I suspect you may want to be at 6 feet for some of the very young children who cannot mask, unquote. And this Harvard's chief of infectious disease referred them to the Harvard, had done a whole resource library on this and had the same conclusion. A distance of 3 feet torso to torso is likely low risk in asymptomatic individuals who are wearing masks. Now, Greg, you're ready for the punchline, right?
Uh-huh. Who is this head of Harvard?
Harvard's chief of infectious disease in July 2020 is Rochelle Walensky, who is now the director of the CDC. So back in July, she was telling her local school district 3 feet is fine. And she makes that caveat about younger kids, and it's tougher to have young. Look, I'm not going to just say the kindergartner teachers are going to have it easy if and when public schools come back. And I feel like every school district, we should be able to work through these kinds of issues. We should be if you're a particularly immunocompromised teacher and you haven't been put to the front of the line like here in Virginia, then fine. We'll figure out a way. Maybe you have to continue virtual and we use a substitute or something. Well, there are particular cases we can work through the details on this. But for your average adult healthy teacher, they should be able to be in a classroom and be just fine. There was that big study of schools down in North Carolina that had 0 cases of student-to-teacher transmission. So here we are. Rochelle Walensky last summer is telling her local school 3 feet is fine. And now she, as the head of the CDC, is saying to schools all across the country, 6 feet is the required minimum. Look, it's very clear that they are changing their recommendations based on political pressure, and it's really infuriating. And if you wonder why the average person doesn't always do as the CDC recommends, it's because of things like this, where they change their advice and try to pretend they never had any previous advice. Rochelle Walensky deserves to be called out before Congress and told to account. Why are you telling people different things in summer than you did in winter? And if it's based on new information, fine. But there's no indication in any of these communications that the data has changed at all about 3 feet versus 6 feet and all the other factors that they're citing, including the HVAC systems and all the other excuses that the teachers' unions are now grappling for.
Come on, man. Trust the science. This is, again, I think most teachers would rather be back in the classroom, especially if they can get fast-tracked to get the vaccination. I can't imagine a teacher who would prefer to be on Zoom for 8 hours a day as opposed to having the kids in front of them. Buck the union. That's with a B. Buck the union. And
you sure? My audio may have glitched there, Greg. Let's just settle on ucking the union, and we'll kind of, you decide how you want that to start.
It's time to say no to the union. How's that? Is that a better way to put it? Real quickly on Fauci, we've had previous COVID relief bills that have passed. Hundreds of $billions still haven't been spent on schools, and he says now schools really shouldn't open until this passes. And I assume he means the Biden version of the plan. So, I mean, Jim, politics is just infesting every bit of this.
No, it's really kind of infuriating. Look, you don't have to look hard to hear all the cases of teens being reported to emergency rooms, suicides up, all kinds of depression up. Like, there's a cost to this. Get the kids interacting with each other again. The thing at the heart of this, Greg, is that, yeah, we're in uncharted territory. We've had a really bad virus thrown our way that we haven't seen anything like since 1919, and it's freaking us out with good reason. But if the health policy experts' plan was that for more than a year, we're going to ask human beings to stay 6 feet or more away from every single individual outside of their households, it's just not going to work. That's just not how human beings are built. We needed a different and better plan for this. And now we're at the point, and by the way, you could keep kids in virtual, in March 2020, and you got to late spring, then you got to September. All right, well, now we're almost a year. Now that we're starting to really see the intense psychological effects and the physical effects and all kinds of other, emotional, social, and probably underlining in red, educational effects of trying to learn from a screen for 4 to 5 hours a day. It doesn't work for far too many kids. Now we have to our tolerance for risk has to change. Particularly, oh, by the way, over as I mentioned in the corner, we're now up to 28 states that are vaccinating teachers. So if you've got the opportunity to get vaccinated, teachers, you should take that opportunity. And if you're not, once you're vaccinated, there's no excuse whatsoever for not getting kids back into school. And I mean 5 days a week. Hell, maybe 6 or 7 days a week.
I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there that would have said this a long time ago, but when you see people like Walensky and Fauci doing a 180 because of the obvious political pressure, it once again goes back to what we were talking about with different rules for different protests last summer. Why should we trust these people ever again? I don't.
No, that assumes any of us ever trusted them again.
Jim, quite a Monday. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos, Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget about our friends over at Theragun. Theragun.com/martini. Also, please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. We're extraordinarily grateful for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please get us on those home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Please follow us on Twitter. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Monday. And please join us Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.
Hi, it's Dana Lash, host of The Dana Show. Every day, I'm here to keep you up to speed on the most important stories and info that you need to know in your very busy life. And if you're always on the go and you want to stay connected, just download our daily podcast and take it with you. It's a great way to get up to speed on what you need to know and what legacy media may not be telling you. Visit danaradio.com and click on the podcast link or subscribe at iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.